You know, it's quite something to be called reckless, offensive, and absolutely crazy by a guy running for president. But that's what Tim Pawlenty called me. So hang on, have a nice lunch, and we're going to talk a little bit about that. You know, every day at 11 o'clock, I hope you get in your email boxes a video from me, and I hope you have time to watch it and then sneak off to lunch and think about it, or watch it while you're munching at lunch. What Pawlenty was mad at me about was stuff contained in the book that Eileen and I wrote called Revolt. And what I did in there was we criticized him, Pawlenty, because on August 28, 2008, the Minnesota Housing Finance Agency Board started a 3-year program to help Muslim families buy homes in ways that would be in compliance with Sharia law. You know, Sharia law means that you can't pay interest. So the question was, how does a Muslim family buy a home? They get a mortgage, they pay interest, they're violating Sharia law. So the Minnesota program said that the state would buy the home, then it would rent the home to the Muslim family, which would pay rent, which the state would then pay to the bank as interest, and then at the end of 20 or 25 years, they'd own the home. Really a fiction, but it avoided the necessity of them having to officially pay interest. So when Eileen and I wrote our book Catastrophe 3 years ago, we criticized that program. Back then we said, imagine a program for observant Orthodox Jews where the state would send in workers to turn on the lights for them during the Sabbath or to drive them around for free so they don't have to operate a motor vehicle on a Saturday. That's exactly what the Minnesota program amounts to. What business does the state have to jump through such hoops to help members of a specific religion to purchase homes? If anything violates the wall of separation of church and state, this is it. Well, and I think, by the way, it's much more serious than that, because Sharia law is gradually taking over the legal systems of the Western countries. Already in Britain and I believe in Canada, if a Muslim sues a Muslim, they can opt out of the secular courts and be tried in a Sharia court if both parties assent. And it provides things like you can't divorce a man for abuse or violence, and no property rights for women in divorce settlements, and child marriages, and all kinds of horrible things like that. So I was really mad at Pawlenty for doing it. Well, when we came to write Revolt and to review him as a presidential candidate, I sent Pawlenty and his staff the actual words we were planning to write in the book, and I asked him for a comment. And on December 13th, 2010, Governor Pawlenty's aide, Alex Conant, sent us the following email, which we print in the book Revolt, and I'm reading it to you now. This program was independently set up by the Minnesota State Housing Agency and did not make any mention of Sharia law on its face, but was later described by critics as accommodating it. As soon as Governor Pawlenty became aware of the issue, he personally ordered it shut down. Does he wish he had shut it down sooner? Of course. Fortunately, only about 3 people actually used the program before it was terminated at the governor's direction. And I printed that right here in the book. Now, Pawlenty is saying that I didn't tell people that he shut it down. He's saying that he was the one who closed it down. He's trying to portray me as being irresponsible and my wife in the way we wrote it in the book. But we printed what he said. But that's no excuse. Because after that program started, all hell broke loose in Minnesota. He could not possibly not have known about the program unless he was on some other planet. Here's what Don Bartholomew, who led the fight against the housing program in Minnesota, described happened. In February 2009, the first Sharia-compliant loan was made, and news of the Minnesota state-sponsored Islamic finance program hits the blog and talk radio. From April to October 2009, ACT for America volunteers organized, various emails sent to the Minnesota Finance Agency staff, phone calls made, volunteers sit in on MHFA board meetings, research is done. November 1st, 2009 to February 20th, 10, 12 installments of the Bostrom Chronicles are sent to Gloria Bostrom, member of the board. March 2010, ACT for America Volunteers, State Paul Chapter, send more than 100 letters to board members and various Minnesota candidates for public office. And then finally, on April 15th of 10, they closed down the program. So where was he? He's governor of Minnesota. Was he in some other state? Forget that these were his appointees who started this program. Forget that it is a tremendous leap of faith to believe that they would act on their own without asking the governor at whose pleasure they serve, who appointed them, whether it was okay to start the program. You have to believe that this guy was on some other planet. Hey, our book Catastrophe sold 300,000 copies. I'll bet some of those were in Minnesota. So how does he pretend he didn't know anything about it? And even if we assume and take it as a word that he didn't know anything about it, what kind of governor is that? He's got a program going on in his state that is the first program of its kind in the country, designed specifically to accommodate the structures of Sharia law. It's disingenuous for him to say that it made no mention of Sharia law. Why else would they be permitting Muslims, nobody else but Muslims, not to pay interest when they buy a home, other than compliance with Sharia law? So I think Pawlenty's program was defective, and I think his denials of it are disingenuous, and I think his attacks on me are because this really is hitting home. He has to explain to the American people either why he let a program operate for a year and a half in his state that promoted Sharia compliance, or why he didn't know about it. Thanks for listening, and have a nice lunch.